Royal Oak, its story, as told by the people that lived it. We'll walk the streets of yesteryear and relive the days of the horse and buggy when times were much simpler and things moved slower. We'll visit historical buildings and look at age-old artifacts, which will always be a part of Royal Oak after the people move on. We'll observe the city as it has grown and prospered, and then wonder, what will tomorrow bring? To the people, to the places, to the things of Royal Oak.
Welcome to People, Places, and Things. Today we're honored to have the opportunity to chat with Clarence H. Johnson of Royal Oak. Please allow me to begin by giving you a brief profile of this remarkable man. Born in 1906, Mr. Johnson became a CPA at the tender age of 23. He's been involved in professional organizations for well over 50 years. He has his bachelor's degree from Wayne State University and a doctorate of athletics from Central Michigan University. His involvements number into the dozens, serving as director or president for such worthy organizations as the YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, Michigan Sports Ages, Health Alliance Plan, Metropolitan Hospital, the United States Amateur Athletic Union, the U.S. Olympic Committee, the International Weightlifting Federation, and the list goes on and on. In our community, Mr. Johnson has served as a board member on the Greater Royal Oak Chamber of Commerce and has been chairman of the Civil Service Board for over 42 years. In 1988, Mr. Johnson was named the City of Royal Oak's Man of the Year. Now, lest you be put off by all of this, let me assure you that this fine man is one of the most approachable people that you could ever meet. He served as a mentor to countless scores of people. Ladies and gentlemen, Clarence H. Johnson. Well, Mr. Johnson, it's nice to be with you today. Tell us, how long have you lived in Royal Oak?
Well, I think we moved to Royal Oak about 55 years ago. And at that time, of course, it was a lot smaller than it is today. And there were a lot more land around and fields and a place for kids to grow up. But even today, Royal Oak has kept its image. They have parks and areas where kids can roam and still enjoy the growing up process. And in spite of its growth, it still stands out in my mind as one of the outstanding cities, not only the Michigan, the United States, but of the world. We have people here we can be proud of, and people that are anxious to keep it the way it is and to improve it.
I think you'd have a lot of agreement on that, sir. You've served most of your 83 years as in promoting the development of young people through sports. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about your involvement with the Olympic Committee, when you became involved, and some of the things you do with that.
Well, it's hard to remember all the details, but I think with the Olympic Committee itself, the United States Olympic Committee, I've been involved with well over 50 years. But I guess you just grow into it. You have an interest in people. You want to see kids grow up and develop into the kind of citizens that we can be proud of. And you'd like to have a part in doing it, and you get a satisfaction, and the first thing you do is you find out you're doing it without any good reason. You just do it because you think that's the thing to do, and you enjoy it. And of course, as you look back now over the years and watch some of these kids, they used to be kids at least, develop and see what they amounted to, you think maybe it's well worth the time that you spend at it.
What kinds of things do you do with the various committees on which you serve?
Talking about the Y and the youth organizations?
Well, I'm thinking specifically perhaps of the Olympic Committee and the weightlifting, your involvement with weightlifting over the years.
Well, from the standpoint of the United States, it's a case of trying to develop some teams and thinking specifically of weightlifting, of finding young fellows that are interested in the sport that are going to develop into world-class weightlifters. We're always anxious to make a good showing. We're anxious to let the rest of the world know that we've got people that are worth knowing and worth developing and that amount to something. And a lot of these kids develop not only into leaders in their community and in the United States, but some of them become world leaders, and they have an effect that, of putting the United States on the map. And those things make us proud. It's primarily getting kids. We don't think primarily of just developing the top class athletes. We want kids also to grow up and to be normal, everyday working people too. And that's where most of them are, and we want to help them at the same time that we're trying to develop outstanding athletes whom we also hope become good citizens besides, not just devote all their time to developing into athletes of their own, on their own, for their own satisfaction.
You know, most of us don't get the opportunity to travel the way you do in serving on these committees. I guess I wonder what some of your most interesting situations have been, most interesting experiences. You were in Munich, for example, I believe, when they had problems there with the Olympics. What are some of the good things that have happened? What are some of the really interesting good things that have happened?
It's from the standpoint of, well, even the massacre that happened in Munich, it had the effect of bringing together, in a common cause, the German people. Some who probably objected to the cost of the Olympics and the inconveniences that were caused by bringing the Olympics there, and may not have had the same interest that others had in having the Olympics. But when the massacre happened, they only thought of one thing, and that was, what could we do to help this situation? And what are the rest of the world going to think of us because this happened? And it served as a means of uniting the German people in spite of all of the tragedy that was caused there. And at the same time, of course, it brought all the rest of the world together because they, in a common cause and hope and desire to eliminate this type of thing. So that sometimes these things have the effect of helping people rather than dragging them down.
You know, those of us that know you, I think of you as our Royal Oaks ambassador to the world. You know, I know that you travel a lot, and that you, over your many years of involvement, have been with many, many famous people. It's nice to know that one of us from Royal Oak is doing these things, and really is an extension of us here in the city of Royal Oak. How far have you traveled this year so far, Mr. Johnson?
Well, this is early in the year, and it hadn't quite started yet, but there'll be a few times. Last year it was a case of going to the Olympics in Seoul, Korea, and back, and then we had a Congress and a World Championships in Indonesia the following month, so a trip to Jakarta and back the same month. The two trips was the equivalent of 2 trips around the world. That was only the latter part of the year. Earlier in the year, of course, we had meetings in France and in Greece, and so that sometimes it becomes quite extensive.
In your, excuse me, in your over 60 years in your profession as being a CPA, how has the profession changed?
Well, primarily, it's like everything else in life. It has become more complicated. Yeah. It seems that the longer we go and the bigger we get, and the more involved, the more regulations are made. 60 years ago and before, wasn't just necessary to take an examination and for the state, the same as a doctor or a lawyer, to decide to practice public accounting. And you went to work on it. You observed the rules, the regulations, the ethics, and it was much easier to get by. We didn't have the income tax laws we have today, along with a lot of other things. We think of income tax because it's almost the 15th of April now, and taxes are due. But in those days, it was much simpler. Today, the regulations that surround the practice of public accounting or law or medicine or anything else have become so complicated that it's necessary to have a library of books to keep up to date on what is necessary to do and what's the proper thing to do.
Tell us a little bit about your flying. Again, those of us that know Mr. Johnson would tell you that he has his own twin-engine Aztec that he still flies regularly. And I'd like you to tell us, if you would, because I'm not even clear on when it was you started flying. How old were you when you first took flying lessons?
Well, when I got flying lessons was probably about 30 years ago, but maybe a little
that would
longer.
have made you, what, 53 years old?
Pretty near.
And you just started flying at the age of 53?
More or less, yeah. I had my first ride back just after the First World War at Selfridge Field, because at the time I was in the Army Reserve and was stationed there for a while, and I had the opportunity of riding in one of the old Jennies, the planes of the First World War. And I think we picked the wrong time to go up. It was just before lunch, and I think Sergeant Oliver had just come down and decided to have lunch, and then they asked him if he wouldn't take me for a ride. And so he did. He did everything that was possible to do with a plane in those days, like loops and dives and spins, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's a good thing it was a long time after breakfast, or we might have had a little more problem in the plane. But that was the first experience, and actually we had a good time. I've had a lot of satisfaction flying in the plane, and I think probably the main reason for getting so involved with it again was the fact that our younger son John had just started at Central Michigan and wanted to take up flying. He joined the ROTC and then found that they did not have Air Corps in college yet, and so he decided to fly. So we flew together, and for 4 years, of course, I had another interest with him that would not have existed if it hadn't been something that both of us really wanted. So, and from then on, we just went from one grade to another, and finally ended up with a APT rating.
So from the age of 53, you began with a private license. You then got your instrument rating, which allows you to fly in bad weather. Then you got a commercial rating after that.
That's right.
And then finally, and of course, then your twin engine rating.
That's right.
And then the air transport rating.
That's right.
The air transport pilot rating.
Yeah.
That's quite remarkable. And I would imagine that at some point in your career you used the airplane for quite a bit for business purposes and probably for some of the Olympic meeting involvement that you had. Wasn't that so?
Well, this is true. It was very convenient to get to places sometimes privately and easier and in locations that would have been a little easier to get to than with the commercial planes. So it's been helpful all along the line.
Now, you mentioned your youngest son, John. I would point out that, as I said earlier, Mr. Johnson is considered a mentor by many of us. He mentors not only other people, but he's mentored certainly his own family. His son John is a pilot with United, I believe. His son Cap is in the accounting profession. His son Jim is an accountant, and Jim is better known to most of us as a commissioner and a beloved one here in the city of Royal Oak. Your grandson Jimmy is a CPA.
Right.
And his wife is also a CPA.
Right.
They're in the business with you. Anything else we should know about the family?
No, but it's a little bit of a satisfaction to feel that one had part in bringing up as far down as the grandchildren. Now we're looking forward to great-grandchildren. But there's a satisfaction of thinking that they wanted to follow in the same profession and are enjoying it and getting some satisfaction out of it. And it's a little bit of a personal satisfaction to feel that you had a part in helping them do it. And this is I think the main purpose of life is helping the other guy get along. And when talking about all of these children, we wouldn't use the term kids a few years ago, but today I guess it's more common. But some of these kids that were 8, 9 years old that were not necessarily picked off the street, but kept off the street and away from bad influences and in certain youth organizations, to have had a part in developing them, and of course at this stage you see some of them at 40 and 50 years of age have accomplished something of use to their fellow humans. It begins to make you feel that maybe some of it was worthwhile. And
well, you know, again, for some of us that know you, we find it remarkable that at your age, 83, there isn't anything that you won't give the old college try to doing. So let's talk about golf a little bit. When did you first start to play golf? Because certainly in the beginning you didn't have time, or the money probably.
Yeah, that's true. Probably pretty near the age of 30. And but like everything else, I think you have to feel that if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So the thing to do is to learn a little bit about it. And so after the first couple of years, why the score started to come down and the satisfactions rose, and for the several years enjoyed playing some competitive golf and with a respectable handicap.
I understand that you consistently shoot better than your age today.
Not quite.
Well, that's, I have it on good authority that you've done that. In fact, I understand that at the Royal Oak Christmas Classic last year, there's some footage that's available that shows that you're a pretty good putter as well.
Maybe some of them are lucky.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure about that. From your perspective, Mr. Johnson, where do you see Royal Oak going from this point on with all of the development that's going on at the 696 Woodward Corridor?
The Royal Oak is developing. I think it's, as far as growing in population, maybe a little more difficult because there isn't a great deal of area to grow into. But what we do have is all good sound basis. I think that economically we're going to get along. We've got a good class of people. All of our citizens, I think, are interested in what's going on. We don't all agree with everything that happens and how it happens and the decisions that are made, but I think they're all sincere about what they want to accomplish. Now we have a great future. I've been impressed from all the years back, and of course, I guess some of the names that we think of, Donderos and so forth, the old founders, they've all had the same aim, and that's to do what is best for the community. And I think that today we can see where a lot of their decisions were the proper decisions, and they probably had differences of opinions then, but it developed. And today, and all over the years, we've had a good class of civic leaders. The commission and our employees are of a good class of people. I think they've got the right attitudes, and they're trying to accomplish things. So I think with that in mind, they're still going to continue to grow. I am very impressed with some of the activities that are going on. That sometimes I think we put the emphasis on the wrong places, the sensational and so forth. But mentioning 696, this is going to be a development, I think, at Woodward and 10 Mile Road that communities for long distances around are going to take pride to think that they are that close, and maybe even are going to use it and maybe had a little part in developing it. And I think that is only one of the things. We talk downtown development, a group of good businessmen are trying to make downtown Royal Oak a top spot where people will be attracted and enjoy being. We've got high-class restaurants for those that want a little entertainment. We've got the theater over there that I think there's a group of people that must be dedicated. The plays that they put on and the... Right. There's just so many activities that are going on that unless we stop and think about it, we take them for granted. But actually Royal Oak is a great place to live and to work and to enjoy life and grow up in. And I think our school system is tops. We criticize some of the things that happen, but it isn't always those folks that cause those things to happen. They get the problem and then they've got to solve them. And I think they do a good job doing it.
From your vantage point of 83 years, I'd like to ask you two things. What is your advice to young people today, and what is your advice to senior citizens today as two separate subjects? Pretty broad subject.
That is. It covers a lot of territory, and
well,
it should take a little thinking about. Yeah.
I ask it because I think 83 years, you've seen 3 generations of people really born, develop, grow up, mature. You have a far greater perspective than most of us. 3 generations is a lot of humanity, and I think we'd like to know what your advice would be to young people.
Well, maybe starting with the young people, because that's where I guess all old people have to start. Today, I think it's more difficult for a kid to grow up because of the conditions that they run into and the things that they're exposed to. And I think it takes a great deal of self-confidence and desire and to live properly to avoid the pitfalls that are so easy to get into today. Drugs is a big problem today. We didn't have that problem when I was a kid. There were bad boys the same as there are today. There were never bad girls. But a lot of those boys grew up and developed into good citizens along with the girls. And I think we've got to put our mind into something that we really want to amount to, and we can't decide what our life is going to be early, but we can make an attempt to at least grow up properly, get the background and as much education as we can to develop. And the main thing is to keep a healthy body so that you can enjoy life and stay away from the things that there's so many things, good things that can be done. And I think that's the thing we want to try to keep kids and get them into the right track. As far as older folks go, I don't think life ends just because we get to a certain age. I think the thing to do is to keep the interests alive, and if you like working, keep on working. And if you like other interests and want to take it a little easier, there's enough to keep us busy. And one thing about Royal Oak is their senior citizen program. I think it covers a lot of people. It provides activities for a lot of people, and they certainly can enjoy a great many satisfactions from those activities that they wouldn't maybe not even have the opportunity of enjoying if it weren't for the programs that Royal Oak puts on.
Well, I can remember that more than one time I've heard you say that it's important to stretch yourself. And I think you mentioned that perhaps looking at me once or twice, but certainly in terms of some of the folks in the community that perhaps are the folks, the very folks that are watching this interview with you, certainly you can be an inspiration to them that stretching yourself a little bit can make all the difference to a happier life. In the years I've known you, I sure know you as a happy, fulfilled human being and a wonderful guy to be around. You've taught me a lot. You've taught a lot of us a lot about what's important in life, and we appreciate that. So I think that you can certainly serve as an inspiration to some of the folks who might think that there isn't a whole lot to do anymore in life.
No, I think unless you stretch, you aren't going to grow. You've got to try to be just a little bit better than you are, regardless of what it is, whether it's athletics or occupation or recreation. Using weightlifting as an example, and of course it applies to every sport, unless an athlete attempts to lift more than he has before, he's not going to lift anymore. And it's the desire to lift more than the other fellows. You keep on trying and trying, and I think it applies to our occupations or anything else. Unless we try to do more than we're doing, we aren't going to expand and accomplish anymore. That's the only. I think that's true in physical development. It's true in occupation. It's true in our recreational desire. And I think it should be expanded to the point of trying to help somebody else. It's good to help one person, but if you can do it for two or three, and just because time is a little short, well, it doesn't mean you can't fit in a fourth or a fifth. And the satisfaction comes in what you can do for somebody else. I don't think you get any satisfaction in just selfishly trying to get everything for ourselves. It's got to be shared with somebody else in order to be fully realized and get the satisfaction from it.
What are your plans, your travel plans for the next 30 days? What is your itinerary?
We've got a national weightlifting championships and a world championships within less than 30 days. So.
And where will those be held?
Well, fortunately, these happen to be in the United States. So that, and of course we can travel across the United States. You don't think it's far, but we can still travel 3,000 miles without getting outside. Sure. And there isn't much more than that over even going across the ocean. But we got a national championships in Houston, Texas, and we got a world championships in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then after that, we got another world championships in Greece, and there'll be a couple of other things before the year's over.
Well, Mr. Johnson, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to sit here and chat with you at this time, and I thank you very much. I thank you for all of the things you've done for our community, for those of us that have known you. We think you're a wonderful guy, and we love you. Thank
well, it's
you,
awfully nice of you to say that, Pete. But
it's true.
Just in your own case, and of course I look at you as being a young fellow, but when I think of how old you are, what means that the rest of us are getting a little older and trying to stay in there. But you've been a community leader ever since I've known you, which is a good many years, and I just hope you keep up the the activity because
Thank you, but this
we're proud of
interview is about
also.
you. Thank you.
Okay.